Our guest today is Randy Sutton. Randy is a retired Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Lieutenant, a nationally known commentator on law enforcement issues, a sought-after speaker, a television and movie actor, and the best-selling author of, yes, because he doesn't do enough, 5 books, including The Power of Legacy, 3 books about policing, and the most recent, Rescuing 911, The Fight for America's Safety, which was an Amazon #1 bestseller. He also founded the nonprofit, The Wounded Blue, to improve the lives of wounded and disabled law enforcement officers through support, education, assistance, and legislative advocacy. Randy Sutton, welcome to Next Steps Forward.
It is a pleasure to be here. You missed one thing.
What'd I miss?
The host of A Cop's Life, my podcast.
Oh, okay, Eric, my producer, I know you're listening, you're fired. So I apologize for that. We usually do pretty good on our homework, but we are human.
I forgive you. I forgive you.
And where can people find that podcast?
On Spotify, all the regular avenues for podcasting.
Beautiful. And before we start, Randy, right before the show, we were quickly chatting, and I like to brag that this is a show of firsts. And for those of you viewing, not watching, Randy is the first guest we've had on here smoking a cigar. So kick back. It's going to be fun 52 minutes for everybody. So grab a cup of coffee or a beer and a cigar, and let's have some fun.
I do have a bottle of whiskey right behind me. We are broadcasting out of my cigar bar.
It's afternoon here on the East Coast, and it's 6 o'clock in London. So, hey, 5 o'clock somewhere. We know that song. So, Randy, like I always do, let's start the beginning. You grew up in New Jersey. What inspired you to pursue a career in law enforcement?
I consider myself very fortunate, Chris, because right from a very young age, I knew what I was going to be. What are you going to be when you grow up? Well, I'm going to be a cop. And that's exactly what I had envisioned for myself. And so having that direction early on, I just channeled my life to move forward in that direction and wound up becoming the youngest police officer in the state of New Jersey at the time, hired at the ripe old age of 19. Now, when I look back on being a 19-year-old cop and some of the decisions I made as a 19-year-old cop, I got to tell you, I kind of shudder sometimes because the world was very black and white then.
Not so much these days.
Not so much. I mean, I was, as a 19-year-old cop, you're not even fully formed as a human being yet. And here I am. I'm making life and death decisions. I am, going to domestic disputes with. And by the way, it was in Princeton, my hometown, that I was a cop. And so I was arresting people I was in school with, their parents. I was writing tickets to moms and dads. I mean, it was I wasn't a very popular person in my own hometown. I can tell you that. And but I did 10 years there, 6 as a patrol officer and 4 as detective before I made the big move and came to Las Vegas.
And we're going to get to that. You mentioned being 19 years old, right out of high school, wet behind the ears, still pretty green. Did they give you any reason to reconsider your decision?
No. I loved being a cop. I even loved being a cop in my small community. I was the only problem there. I was bored. That was the issue. But I loved the work. I loved being a protector. Even from an early age, I was a protector. I was the guy that stood up to the bullies on behalf of other kids in the class. I got my ass kicked a few times, and it got a lesson taught to me every now and then that no good deed goes unpunished, right? But still, it was innate in me. And service is, sometimes you got to go with what your calling is, what your nature is. And I'm a huge believer in service and giving back, and probably in the ensuing years from those till now, that's even been more pronounced. I'm a huge believer in service and patriotism and community.
So that's just your DNA.
It is.
Yeah. No, we need more people like that. So before we get to Vegas, how'd your time in Princeton, New Jersey shape the kind of police officer and man that you became?
So I was very fortunate once again in the fact that I had a fantastic family life. I literally had the Beaver Cleaver life. Princeton's a pretty affluent community. My parents weren't rich, but they weren't poor. We were middle class, and I was born in a beautiful community. My parents, raised me with love. Literally till the day they died, we had a very, very close relationship. And so, I think we don't even realize how fortunate we are in our young years, with the gifts that are given to us. But I actually was. I saw, and I was kind of a student of life even as a kid. I saw, disruptive families. I saw parents that didn't give a damn about their kids. I saw their kids, how they grew up with parents that didn't give a damn. And I always realized how fortunate I was that I had parents that cared about me. And so I never went through that. Sometimes the teenage years are a little rough. I never went through that because I respected my parents, and I never had those issues. So that kind of base is critical for forming yourself as a human being. My father was not the wise sage, orator, but I do remember a couple of times. I remember one time when I was about 10 years old, and I was very sickly as a child. I spent much of my young years in and out of hospitals, and I couldn't play with the other kids a lot. I couldn't play sports because I was sick all the time, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. I spent like 2 months in Philadelphia Children's Hospital undergoing every test imaginable. And I was bedridden for much of my very young years, 7, 8, 9. And my parents, of course, were worried to death. And after not getting any satisfaction from going to all these, modern doctors, they heard about a doctor, a naturopath, who saved the life of one of their friends who was given a terminal cancer diagnosis. And after she went to this naturopath, she went on with a normal life. So out of desperation, my parents take me to this doctor. Now, here's how crazy he was. He marched to the beat of his own drummer. He only had office appointments from 12 midnight till 4 in the morning, because that's where his rhythm was, right? So my parents wake me up at midnight to take me to the doctor. And even as a 10-year-old, I know that if my parents are taking me to the doctor at midnight, I am really screwed up, right? So they take me to Trenton, New Jersey, and we knock on the door of this old brownstone house, and this little bird-like man opens the door, Dr. Samuel Getlin. I'll never forget him. And he was ancient, and he ushered us into his waiting room. And now I'm used to the most modern hospital facilities. This is a cramped little office with National Geographics from the 40s and faded photographs of. I mean, it was almost comical. And he said, "I'm going to take a urine sample and a blood sample, and then I'm going to go back to my lab, and I'll be right back with you." He's going back to his lab. So my parents and I are in the waiting room, and I look at his medical certificate. It's from the 20s. Right? He's from the 20s. This guy is old. And my parents, I could see they're looking at each other going like, what are we doing here, right? And he comes in and he ushers us into his exam room. He doesn't ask me any of my symptoms. He tells me every single one of my symptoms. He says, "You can't get out of bed. You're tired all the time. You gain weight. You lose weight. You're depressed." He went through everything that I was experiencing. And my parents were like, yeah. And then he looked at my parents and he said, well, first he said, "I know what you're having. I know what you eat. You eat cheeseburgers, you have ice cream, you do this, Count Chocula, that kind of, yeah." And he turned to my parents, he says, you're starving your son to death." And they looked at him, they go, "What?" He says, "Your son is malnourished." and he has hypoglycemia, which I never had heard of course, as a kid. It's the opposite of diabetes. He said, you are literally starving your child to death. He has no nutrients in his body. And he says, from now on, there will be no sugar. There will be no white flour. There will be none of this. There will be none of that. He changed it. Now we're conscious of this, right? But back in the 60s, we weren't. And he gave me 72 vitamins a day to take. I'm 10 years old. I'm taking 72 vitamins a day, which I did for years, and it changed. He cured me. He cured me. Nutrition cured me. So today, when I see what's going on in our world with nutrition, and finally we're actually addressing it, it is absolutely, to me, it saved my life. Literally saved my life. And then Dr. Samuel Getlin was mugged and murdered shortly afterwards. The world lost a great gift to crime.
Do you feel that particular incident also helped you shape your path to being a police officer?
I do. It was this kind, gentle soul who
saved your life,
had the ability to help so many people, was taken from us because of violence. Yeah. It's to this day, I think about it all the time.
And you remember every detail about it, so it clearly left a good and memorable mark for you.
Yeah.
So, shifting gears a little bit, New York City, where I've spent 25 years of my career, is the city that never sleeps. But Las Vegas is unlike any other city.
Yep.
Any other city. How does police work in Las Vegas different from other parts of the country? And even though you were a cop in Princeton for a decade, did it fully prepare you for Las Vegas offered?
Great question. And it is, I was not ready for this change. I thought I was. Now, like I said, I was an experienced police officer. 10 years on the job is a long time. In fact, when I made the decision to leave, all my friends and compatriots and comrades were saying, Randy, you're almost halfway to retirement. Are you out of your mind? I was at the top of my pay scale, and my family is there. It was a tough decision, but I just wasn't being challenged, and I needed the challenge. So I actually researched different agencies, and Las Vegas Metro PD had a fantastic, stellar reputation in the law enforcement community. And so I came out here. I had to start all over again. I had to take the police test, had to get hired, had to go through the academy, had to go through field training, and literally become a rookie again. And but here's the quintessential reminder of a change like this. So I was, some people said, well, Randy, you got to go through the academy again. And I'm glad I did, because policing in Vegas, I'll illustrate it with this story. As a cop in New Jersey, if I even drew my gun, it was a highly unusual set of circumstances. I was still on probation when I was in my first shooting here, when a 15-year-old gang member tried to kill me. I was chasing a stolen car. I was in a gang-infested area. It's 2:30 in the morning. The car full of gangbangers. They crashed. I ran after the driver. My partner ran after one of the passengers. And it's 2:30 in the morning. I go around the corner of a building, and I was pretty close to him. But when I came around the corner, he was waiting for me to shoot me. And I came around looking down the barrel of a weapon. And I had my gun in my hand, and I fired a round. And the round zipped right by his ear and hit the building behind him, and a piece of stucco broke off and hit him in the head. And he thought he was shot, but he couldn't drop that gun fast enough. So thank God I didn't have to kill this 15-year-old, but you're not in Kansas anymore, Toto. And that was the reality moment for me, that you're in the big city now. And it's a dangerous, dangerous place to be. And the police work is entirely, I mean, the basics are the same, but police work is entirely different. You have to act differently as a cop in an urban environment than you do. In Princeton, we called ourselves grin and wave cops. Hi, Mrs. Jones. In Vegas, you better be a warrior. You better have that warrior spirit. And it saved my life on more than one occasion.
You just went through one memorable call. What's the most memorable call or case you responded to in your career?
That's there's actually several, but I'm gonna go to the positive one this time. Every cop goes through life-changing moments, an incident that will alter their life, whether you're in a big city or a small town. I had some in Princeton too, but one in particular that to this day is very much on the forefront of my mind is I was a patrol sergeant, and I was in a right off the Las Vegas Strip. And as I came around the corner, I saw a car up on the side of the road, and it was people running around screaming. And so I radioed for a backup, and I'd be out with unknown trouble. And it was bedlam. I get out of the car, and as I'm approaching this vehicle, there's people running around screaming. And then I see bullet holes all over the car. And then somebody screamed, "Oh my God, the baby's been shot." And I looked down, and there in a little baby infant seat is a 1-month-old baby who'd been shot in the face. And it was a drive-by shooting, turned out to be a gang initiation. Mom and dad, innocent people, immigrants from El Salvador with their little baby in the back. They had just pulled up alongside of him for no reason whatsoever and opened fire on the car. And one of the bullets hit the baby in the face. And our protocol is this: you call for an ambulance and you turn them over to the medical people, right? But when I checked this baby, I knew that if I didn't get her to the hospital, she was going to die. So, now just think of the scene. You got mom and dad there. Their baby's been shot. It's a wild scene. There's people running around screaming. I don't know what just happened. I don't know if the shooter's still there. So I'm looking all over. But then I focused on the baby. First patrol car that got there to back me up, I scooped the little baby up and I said, "Get to the hospital." And what had happened was when the bullet hit her face, she's just a little thing, her head is the size of a softball. And the bullet took off a big chunk of her face, and a bunch of the tissue and stuff went down her throat and choked her. Well, I was able to scoop that out of her mouth and give her mouth to mouth and bring her back. And because I was there within minutes, there was no brain damage. We got to the hospital. I handed the little baby off, and she's my goddaughter now.
That is amazing. So
that story changed my life. And I'll tell you how. That night was so vivid to me. I went home that night, and I lived up in the mountains outside of Vegas at the time. And me and a bottle of Johnny Walker wrote the story about that, called Her Name Was Jackie. I didn't have anything to do with it. I didn't have any plans for it. I just felt like I needed to write it. So I got the yellow pad out, the way we used to do in the old days, and my ballpoint pen, and I wrote the story, and it just felt cathartic to do. Mm-hmm. And I put it in a drawer, and it sat there for years. And it literally sat there until the World Trade Center was attacked. And of course, that was the deadliest day in law enforcement history. And I was so frustrated at not being able to help. And I thought, wait a minute, hold on a second. I've got that story sitting in that drawer. And every cop I know has a story like that. I'm going to ask them to write that story. And I'm going to put it in a book, and I'm going to donate all of the royalties to the families of those police officers who died. And that's exactly what I did. And that was my first book, called True Blue, Police Stories by Those Who Have Lived Them. And it sold very well. It was published by a major publisher and started my writing career. The editor-in-chief in St. Martin said, Randy, I like your style. I like the way you write. I want your next book to be all of your own stories. And that book is called A Cop's Life. And that's still available to this day on Amazon. And probably is my best book but it's very dark too. It's very dark. Because at the time I was writing it, my father was dying. And I was by his bedside a lot of that time. And I was writing, I was dredging up my memories to write the book. And because I was in a dark place anyway, it seemed that most of the stories were pretty dark. And it's it's an emotional book. But I'm really glad I wrote it, and I'll tell you why. I started getting letters from cops that read it, and they said, "Thank you for writing this book because I thought I was alone in my feelings," and that was the first time I understood, which later became really consequential to what I do now. That all of these men and women felt isolated and felt alone. That was a huge moment for me to understand that. And that's why it was really important that book came out. And still to this day, I still get letters from cops from all over the nation.
Well, as someone who was at Ground Zero 9/11, I want to thank you for that. And I understand in terms of the proceeds, I'm also working with some spouses of victims who've been underpaid from the Victims' Compensation Fund.
Yeah.
So I'm working to try and rectify that. Apologies to all the lawyers out there, but they're using it for their own annuity, and it's not going to those people who need it and certainly deserve it. And Randy, again, being a show first, so thank you for that story about your goddaughter. That is an unbelievable story, so I appreciate you sharing that. I'm going to go way off script here, which I normally don't do, and Eric's going to get mad at me, but sorry, I already fired him earlier in the show, so it's okay. It doesn't matter anymore. I got my doctorate about a year or so ago, and it was focused on the barriers for police officers seeking mental health treatment. Mm-hmm. And you talked about your book in terms of writing your dark story and then inviting other police officers to write their stories. And you said, quote, I was alone. I thought I was alone in my feelings. You had dozens and dozens and dozens of police officers tell you that.
Yep.
And I'm not going to say it's the same job, but you're all police officers. You all face the same risks. Obviously, Princeton's going to be different than Las Vegas. Stanford's going to be different than Los Angeles. Why is it you think that police officers will just bury that stuff versus going and seeking help and finding treatment? The word I always heard was stigma when I did my dissertation. Mm-hmm. Still at that point today, or have things changed in this newer, more open society and generation?
We are seeing changes. Now, remember, this is my world now. As the founder of the Wounded Blue, I live and breathe this every single day. I work 7 days a week, 24/7. I am on call all the time. There is still stigma. There is still a reluctance to talk about the things that are bothering you. There's still isolation, but it's getting a whole lot better. It was almost impossible to go ask for help 20 years ago. Now that's really changed a lot because there is a much greater understanding of mental health, and so we're definitely not where we need to be, but we're traveling the road to get there. What I do now is with the Wounded Blue is we help injured and disabled officers across the country. We're a nationwide charity. And I started it because of what happened to me, because I became disabled in the line of duty. I suffered a stroke in my police car. And it was the most frightening moment of my life. And I've had some frightening moments, as you might well imagine. But laying there on the pavement, right in front of Bally's Hotel, unable to speak, unable to move, completely helpless as tourists walked by and took my picture. It's a memory that I'll live with forever. But what had and once again, my guardian angel, that angel that's been on my shoulder my entire career, was with me again, and I survived it. And the clot went through my brain, but it ended my police career. And I loved being a cop. I did not expect that this was going to be my end. And then what happened next was truly life-changing as well. And that's my own department turned its back on me. It said, we're not paying your medical bills. We're not giving you your benefits. Have a nice life. And I go, wait a minute. You can't do that to me. It's the law. You have to pay my medical bills. It's a workers' compensation injury. It's very clear in the law. I said, yeah, well, make us. And it was such a betrayal. It was so shocking to me. I went to go see the sheriff who I'd served with for 24 years. And I said, how do you treat me like this? And he said, Randy, this isn't personal, man. It's just business. I'll never forget those words. He was telling me the truth. See, I was no longer an asset to my department. I was now a liability, a financial liability. Now, they knew they were legally obligated to pay for my treatment. They knew they were legally obligated to give me my benefits. But they also knew that the process would take a year and a half, going through the court system, et cetera, and so forth. I had to get an attorney. I had to fight them every step of the way. They spent tens of thousands of dollars of taxpayers' money to fight me. And I'm trying to figure out why. And talk about feeling isolated, feeling betrayed. But you see, they were betting that they were hoping that I would die in the meantime and they wouldn't have to pay. That's a very, very bitter pill to swallow, especially as a cop, when you think that the blue family is there for you, like you hear at the beginning of your career. We're one big family. Yeah, well, we're a dysfunctional family. So I won. And then because of being so visible in the law enforcement community, from being on the TV show Cops and being in movies and writing books and being a police trainer, cops started reaching out to me, not because I could do anything, but only because I was visible in the law enforcement community. And they reached out, and I kept on getting these messages. Randy, I know you don't know me, but I was shot in the line of duty, and my chief never even visited me in the hospital, and they're not paying my medical bills. Randy, I was paralyzed when a drunk hit my police car. They've thrown me away from all over the country, all ending the same way. I feel betrayed. I feel isolated. I feel alone. And then the worst ones where I wish I'd never survived. And I realized that this is a national need, and there's no resource for these men and women. So I created it, and we are the Wounded Blue, and we have helped more than 15,000 police officers in the last 6 years. And we recognize injuries as either being physical or emotional and psychological. And we probably deal with more PTS issues than I do even physical injuries. But it is an incredible journey, one that I never thought I would be on. But there's a philosophical phrase that I created, and I live by this phrase. And that is that you cannot choose your destiny, but you can create your legacy. And I choose to create the legacy of the Wounded Blue and dedicating my life to the service of these men and women who are so deeply in need. And man, we've got some great success stories. Got some terrible, believe me, I can tell you heartbreaking story after heartbreaking story. But I can also tell you some absolutely amazing, heartwarming stories that we've had success in giving lives back to officers who had no hope. No hope.
Would you be willing to share a story with us so our listeners know the great work that the Wounded Blue does?
Absolutely. I'm going to tell you a success story. I'm going to tell you, I got so many on the opposite side of the track, but I've got some great ones. And I'm going to tell you the backstory first, because this is incredible. I fully believe that most Americans believe in and trust their police. Despite what a lot of the media says, despite what we went through under the George Floyd insanity, defunding, demoralizing, dehumanizing, most Americans believe in their police. And I was on Fox News during the height of that insanity, talking about injured officers, as a matter of fact. And I got a phone call. Randy, I just saw you on Fox News. I support law enforcement. I want to know more about your charity. And it was very clear that this man was very savvy in the charity space. And when he asked me for my 990s, which are my tax, shows how you spend your money for a charity, I knew this guy, he was in that charity world. So I sent him my 990s, and he called me back and he says, I'm going to make it a happy, this is right at Christmas time. So I'm going to make it a happy new year for you. He sent me $100,000. I've never received anything like that ever. And I spent that money visiting police officers who'd been shot or severely injured, giving their families some money for babysitting and things like that. That began a relationship that continues to this day. And I don't know who this man is. And as of today, in the last year and a half, I've given out more than $1 million to save police officers' lives. He is literally the voice on the phone, an angel. So he and I were having a conversation. There's a police officer I know who's actually part of my team, who, when he was 35 years old, this is 6 years ago, was severely injured in the line of duty. Guy was in the best shape of his life. Young father, triathlete, gets in a fight with a 16-year-old meth head. During the fight, they fall. His spine hits the curb, and he loses all sensation from the waist down. He's literally in a fight for his life. Luckily, his backup got there, got the guy in custody. They get him to the hospital, and they say, you need spinal surgery, but we don't have a surgeon that has the capability here. So instead of putting him in an ambulance and taking him to Dallas, which was 2.5 hours away, they told him to go home. Go home and find your own doctor. And that began the nightmare. Workers' comp said, well, if they sent you home, you don't need surgery. And for the next 6 years, he has declined to the point where 6 months ago, he was in a wheelchair. He couldn't come back to work full duty, so they fired him. No pension, no benefits. Oh, you can't come back to work? See ya. Have a nice life. Luckily, the sheriff in the county knew he was a talented investigator on human trafficking, and so brought him onto the sheriff's department, where he is to this day, and supports him. Because that police chief in his first department, I wouldn't urinate on him if he was on fire. The sheriff that he's working for now, we gave him a leadership award because he is compassionate and empathetic and the kind of police leader we need in this country. So this officer has now undergone 11 surgeries that they have botched. They gave him surgeons that didn't have the skill level to fix him. Budget surgeons. He's literally in so much pain that he can't do anything. He can only walk very short periods of time. We bought him a wheelchair. So this is the backdrop. Several months ago, I'm having a conversation with the voice on the phone. He's telling me about a Green Beret who was told he would never walk again. who after 20 years of service to his country his back was so badly injured that he was in chronic pain, addicted to painkillers, suicidal. And this guy was a warrior. Well, the voice on the phone knew one of the greatest spinal surgeons in this nation and sent this Green Beret to him. And today he's walking 5 miles a day. And he's telling me this story. And I said, wait a minute. I have a guy. And I said, it sounds like, he says, okay, tell you what, send me all his medical records. I'm going to send him to this doctor. Now, this officer lives in Texas. This doctor's right outside of D.C. We send him all the medical records. And he says, I need to see this man. Send him to me. So we sent this officer and his wife to this doctor for a week of intensive testing. And this doctor said, I can significantly help him. Now, workers' comp said, we're not paying anything. We're not paying for this. We paid close to $300,000 in medical care. And this officer is walking and will be dancing with his daughter at her wedding in September. This is the Wounded Blue. And the message from my voice on the phone was to tell him that Americans care about him. That's the opposite side of the spectrum from what you hear. But because this man is such a believer in empathy and compassion, and he is my angel. He is my angel on the phone. So that's a hell of a story, isn't it?
That's beyond a hell of a story. Thank you for sharing that. And let's see if we can get you another angel on the phone. Where can people learn more about the Wounded Blue?
TheWoundedBlue.org is our website. People can contact me directly, Randy at TheWoundedBlue.org. That's Randy at TheWoundedBlue.org. And we've just instituted something. Raising money is a real problem for every charity, right? There's just everybody has got their hand out, and it sucks, man. I hate asking people for money. It is, but I have no choice. If I'm going to help others, I have to ask for help. And while it goes against my inner being, this is the nature of what I have to do. Well, we recently came across a really novel way of raising money through a company that does credit card processing. But what they do, they have a charitable foundation attached to them. And this is amazing. Anybody that takes credit cards, that is a business that takes credit cards, if you give me 10 minutes of your time, I can explain how you can support the Wounded Blue, save your company money, and you get a tax deduction as a result of it. We now have a couple companies. This just happened recently. I now, in this last week, have two companies that have signed on to this program where they're saving money for their company. They get a tax deduction, and they are supporting the Wounded Blue through credit card processing fees that this company donates to the Wounded Blue. So any of your listeners that have businesses where they take credit cards, if you want to support the Wounded Blue, I can show you a way that won't take any money out of your pocket, and you can change the life of a police officer. You may save the life of a police officer simply by giving me 10 minutes of your time.
And again, what's your website address?
The website is thewoundedblue.org, and I am Randy at thewoundedblue.org.
Got to give you the plugs when I can.
I appreciate it, man. Listen, it is through podcasts, it is through media that people understand and learn about my organization. Without having a forum like this, no one will know about the plight of these men and women. No one will give a damn because they don't know. So that's why I am absolutely, thankful to you for giving me the opportunity to be on your show, which, by the way, is a fantastic show. You do a great job.
Thank you.
With what you do. And believe me, I've been on hundreds. I'm probably approaching over 1,000 podcasts that I've been on. And being on with a consummate professional like yourself is really something that I enjoy.
No, I appreciate that. And I just be thanking you for your service and your sacrifice and all that you've done for us. And again, being a show first, I've completely blown up my script. And so we're going to go off script today. I'm just looking at my notes. You mentioned a few minutes ago about the Blue family. We're there till the end. We've got your back. You hear that about police, fire, EMT, military/veterans. These stories you're telling me are shocking. Mm-hmm. They're disturbing. They're troublesome. And, I've got a bunch of friends that are cops, and they say, there used to be a talent pool. Now it's a talent puddle. And if you hear stories like that, well, who the hell's going to want to be a cop?
And I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, the reason I wrote my latest book, Rescuing 911, The Fight for America's Safety, is to address these issues. We are in a crisis. We are in a law enforcement crisis right now. We're in the midst of it. And it began years ago, but it was exacerbated by the George Floyd madness. It really started in Ferguson with the greatest lie and misinformation campaign ever told about police. Hands up, don't shoot. We now are facing a crisis of cops. There's not enough of us. Not enough cops in America. You have chronic shortages in the biggest cities in this nation. Add to that, you just asked the question, who the hell would want to be a cop? That's what we're facing. So the pool of potential police officers has diminished demonstrably because of what society has done to policing. The politicians, the media have demonized law enforcement for years, creating an environment of distrust, of hate, of discontent. And now we're reaping the rewards of that. And it is startling. And this is a generational issue that you don't even hear talked about. Well, I talk about it in my book because I talk about how we got here and what we need to do to get out of it. And that is to unify as a country. That is for unity between the people and the police. The father of modern policing, Sir Robert Peel, created the London Metropolitan Police Department. The father of modern policing. He spoke these, I'm going to paraphrase, the people are the police and the police are the people. Those are truer words have never been spoken, and yet we've gotten away from that concept. But that is true. Your cops are the people that live in your community. They're your neighbors. They're your friends. They're people that care. Right now, I was asked about this, about how do we get out of this crisis? And here's one of the ways that we need to do it. When the United States military became an all-volunteer military, they couldn't fill the ranks, right? So they started incentives. We're going to pay for your college. We're going to give you this. We're going to give you that. We're going to, Well, they still couldn't fill their ranks except for one branch, the United States Marine Corps, because what they said was the few, the proud, the Marines. Law enforcement needs to take a page out of that book, because the reality is this: there is no more noble profession than to be a police officer in the United States of America. And we need to celebrate those men and women. We need to encourage those men and women. We need to shout from the from the mountaintops that to be a cop in America is to be a hero. And that is where we have fallen. And this is why I hear stories of heroism every single day. Every single day. I could tell you stories that would just blow your mind. But nobody hears about them because they don't make the news. We only hear the garbage. And yet policing in America is still the most noble profession in this country. So we're in a crisis. It's going to take a generation to get out of it. And I don't know that policing will ever be the same. But there will always be what we call the sheepdogs, the protectors of the flock. And that's a call to action. If you are looking for a career, I'm talking to young men and young women who are listening to this right now. If you want a career that can provide you with some of the most incredible moments of your life, where you can be of service, where you can play a role in the lives of others, you can save the lives of others, don't listen to the garbage. Find yourself a home in a police agency that you can be proud of, and join us. Those are my words.
Those are great and powerful words. So thank you for sharing those. We touched.
And if you play your cards right, you can smoke a cigar and drink a whiskey with me someday.
I'm going to take you up on that one. We talked about 9/11 briefly a little bit here, and I'm doing some work for the 25th commemoration next year, and everyone I'm talking to as part of the project talks about how unified the country was right after that. You walk through New York City, where I was working and living at the time, and instead of the neighborhoods having their heritage flags, whether it be Mexico, Venezuela, whatever it may be, it was nothing but American flags. We were never more unified than that moment in time. We are now 24 years later, and we've forgotten what that was like. It's a full generation or two beyond that. And you just mentioned, I wrote down, media and politics have demonized law enforcement as a generational issue. How do we become unified again? Or can't we? Because the people on the far left and the far right have the bullhorn, and they're the ones screaming from the top of the mountain, and the rest of us are putting our head down and just trying not to listen, but it's hard not to.
And that's why we have to look at this in the long perspective. We have to look at this, that it is not going to change overnight. The media is not going to suddenly become our friend. We have to stay the course and persevere through honor, through integrity, through compassion, through empathy. And by continuing on the course, sometime it will change. It's like it's the old starfish analogy. Look at all those hundreds and thousands of starfishes. Can't save them all. Yeah, well, you can save that one. And I fully believe in that concept. We cannot be demoralized. And it's easy to become demoralized. It's easy to take that road and say, well, screw them. Yeah, they're not going to appreciate me. Hell with them. And I've seen it. I felt it myself. And until I talked to myself and said, hey, you know what? This is exactly what the left wants. They want to demoralize us. Instead, we need to keep our head down, see where we're going, be proud of who we are, be proud of the people around us. There are heroes among us, heroes, and realize that this too shall pass.
I mean, like Reagan said, we need to be that bright, shining light on a hill.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not.
Well, you know what? In reality, we are. We are that bright, shining light. When I say we are, I'm talking about the law enforcement profession. We are that bright, shining light. We are, I love Joe Wamba. Do you remember Joe Wamba, the writer?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He was an LA cop. He wrote a book called The Blue Knight. And it was a movie, and it was, I believe, a TV show as well. And I always think about that. You know, what does a knight represent? They represent honesty, integrity, courage, all of the good things, the protectors. And that's what police officers are. And it's really important for cops to understand that you are the protector. You're doing God's work. And it's easy to get demoralized. It's easy to become disillusioned. And keeping your eye on the realities of the heroics of the job. And I don't mean heroics in the sense of, hey, you got to run into a burning building every day, right? The heroics are going to work every day. The heroics are doing this job compassionately, of not allowing the negativity to erase what you joined the job for. Maintaining your own integrity, maintaining your own sense of empathy and compassion that brought you to this job to begin with. Because nobody gets on this job to get rich. You know, salaries now are a lot better than they used to be. Well, I say that. I'm dealing with a police officer right now. This is one of the not so happy endings yet, but we're working on it. Female police officer ambushed walking up on a domestic dispute, was hit with a rifle bullet in the hip. It bounced into her abdomen, did terrible, terrible damage. She is now paralyzed in one of her legs. She is fighting to get the treatment that she needs. We're helping her with that. You know what her pay is? But her pay is $2,200 a month. That's what they're paying her, $2,200 a month. That is a salary for a police officer in certain communities. That's an outrage, an absolute outrage. So we are working with this officer, doing everything we can to get her medically taken care of. Whether she'll ever get the use of that leg back, we don't know. But we're dealing with the traumas that she's been dealing with and getting her the help that she needs.
Randy Sutton, the founder of thewoundedblue.org. Again, it's thewoundedblue.org. Thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your story and the great, great work you do. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Chris. Thanks for having me.
No, of course. And thanks to our listeners. I'm Chris Meek. We're out of time. We'll see you next week. Same time, same place. Until then, stay safe and keep taking your next steps forward.